Hey y'all, it's Ashley at Bookishrealm. I'm sorry. I was supposed to film this video a long time ago, and I actually didn't get to filming it because, you know, life has been lifing. There's been a lot. I've had a lot on my plate, and traditionally on Tuesdays I would have my weekly wrap-up go up, but that's going to go up another day this week as opposed to it going up on Tuesday. This will go up in Tuesday instead. So just bear with me as we do this. So a while ago, I put up a question on, I was about to say on YouTube. I didn't put this up on YouTube. I put up a question on Instagram and asked y'all, what is something that you would change about the book community? And I always love the participation because I love doing these videos where I ask you a question and then I react to your responses. Now, keep in mind, I screenshotted these responses a while ago and I saw a few of them. I don't remember any of your responses. So this is going to be very interesting because I did not go back and look at the responses before I sat down to film this video. It is what it is. As always though, before we get started, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more content from me, click the subscribe button, hit the bell for notifications. And if you're looking for ways to support the channel, all the links will be down in the description box below as per usual. Okay, so we are probably going to do our typical 5 to 6 responses, and I have a few pages worth of screenshots. I'm going to try to, you know, just try to move through these as quickly as possible, and I'm going to keep everyone who responded, keep their identity anonymous because I just do that out of respect. I don't share at all because I feel like y'all trust me to keep you anonymous, and so I will continue to do that. But the first one that I see is one that, considering this is my 10-year anniversary in this community, I'm not shocked to see this, and I feel you on this one. The repetitive drama and problematic behavior from authors, readers, and publishers. This is so hilarious because I remember when I did my things I don't want to see in 2024. I said that one of the things I did not want to see was problematic behavior, the problematic behavior that we saw last year. I didn't want to see it this year, but humans are going to human because humans are human. And at the end of the day, we knew we were going to see it. But it would be nice if we went a year where we didn't see the repetitive behaviors with the review bombing and the conflict. And unfortunately, we saw a lot of that at the end of last year. And it has been astronomical this year, y'all. It has been at a completely different level this year. I don't know what's been happening. It seems like every week the book community is going through a series of issues, and I cannot fathom what is going on in 2024. 2024 has seemingly been a rough year for all of us on all fronts, and we just can't get it together. So yes, I do agree. The repetitive drama is kind of hard to see, and the longer that you're a part of the community, you see a lot of the drama kind of recycle itself in different ways. It's almost like we don't learn from our past, from our history, so we don't repeat it in the future. We just keep doing it over and over again, which I think is the nature of being a part of any and every community. Here goes another good one because I think that a couple of people have had discussions about this via Instagram, TikTok, and it's an interesting shift. And as someone who does not have the financial flexibility, I find this one to be really intriguing. And it's actually it's two comments that I think kind of go hand in hand. So the first one said, losing the idea that big collections are best and library/digital is bad. And the other comment was, feels like the emphasis is on acquiring special editions en masse over actually reading and sharing. So that has been a new thing lately, and I think that that is a shift and trend that we've seen in the last few years. That's not to say that we haven't seen special editions before, that this hasn't been a thing in the past, because it definitely has. This conversation has come up before, but the release of special editions seems to have reached a peak in a level that I personally, and I can only speak for myself, that I have never seen before. And a lot of that is tied to publishers doing the sprayed edges and the special editions, bookstores like Barnes & Noble exclusive editions, Books A Million exclusive editions, and then you have a lot of these book box companies that are also doing special editions and you know, in sets, series, and they are hundreds of dollars. And that's not me saying something here to check your wallets. Personally, I need to be checking my own wallet. I'm not checking anybody else's wallet. But it is interesting how that shift has occurred and how it is now a trend to acquire not popular titles, popular titles in special edition format. Collect however you want to collect, but I do think that that trend is something that is newer to the community that we're seeing a lot of. And we are starting once again, I think, to kind of lose that essence of having a digital library, borrowing stuff from your library. But once again, I always say the caveat to that is that everybody's libraries are not built the same. And I don't just mean like physically, I mean also financially. So some libraries have better funding than others, and it can be quite hard to find the newest stuff if you have a library that doesn't have the best funding. But then of course, then there's that conversation of, do we always have to be reading new releases because that's the thing that we do? Why can't we read backlists? So there's a lot of moving pieces and parts to this conversation that I'm not going to dig into here right now, because this video could just be a thing of its own. Like that conversation could be a video of its own, is what I mean. But yes, I do think that that is a feeling that a lot of people do have. The special edition collection and the need to make a lot of these special editions coming from book boxes and publishers is a new thing that has been happening across all platforms lately, and they are beautiful. Don't get me wrong, they are eye candy. I just know for me personally, I don't have the financial freedom to justify spending that much on special editions. If you do, power to you. I'm low-key kind of jealous. The next one is one that's interesting because it does closely apply to one of the things that I said I was not going to do in 2024, and I have not done it in 2024, although I haven't been as active in the community this year just because my life has taken quite of a change up here. But this comment says, fake diversity TBRs, actions speak louder than words. And I think that that is, it's changing a little bit in the sense that I feel like some people just don't care. And I mean that in the sense that some people are in a place now where they're just going to read what they're going to read. I think that it is not as prevalent as maybe I have seen it in the past, where people will make TBR specifically for, especially here in the United States, related to like Black History Month, related to Native American Heritage Month, Hispanic Heritage Month, or Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Like a lot of those, Pride, a lot of people will make TBRs aligning with the celebration of those specific groups, and then A, won't read those books when it comes time for them to share their wrap-ups, or B, that's the only time that they read those books. And so I have seen that happen in the community. I don't know if it's happening as much, but one thing that I know that I have done this year is that I am not going to, I don't even say encourage, but I'm not going to ask people to broaden their horizons and read diversely, because I think for me, and this is just me, because I know that there are people who are still doing it, and I commend them for it, and I'm glad that they're using their platform for it. But I know for me, it's just one of those things now where I feel like I have hit the nail on the head a few times, and I know that it has become pretty cyclical, and the people who follow me know that I read diversely. I don't have to ask you to do it. I'm not in that place anymore where I want to keep pushing and saying, hey, reading diversely is really great. Like, it's fun. You find different things and different genres and ways that you can connect with different experiences, and there's so many different great reasons to read diversely, but I just don't want to keep having to die on that hill anymore. But yes, that has happened. I have seen that happen before. Ooh, this one is good. This is something that I have tried to embrace this year, and it has come at the cost of viewership. But I think part of me, in my heart of hearts and in my soul, I'm okay with that. And that is, and this is great advice and something that they wish that they could change about the book community, which is read for you and not for your followers. And I think that that is something that is difficult, especially as like a content creator. It's easy to get caught up in this environment where you want to read for the appeasement of other people because it entertains them instead of reading what you enjoy. And I know a couple of people have been really, really frustrated with the idea of people reading things you know you're not going to like, reading things for specifically content purposes and then burning yourself out and not reading what you want to read. I can only speak for me because I can't speak for any other content creators, but it is very easy to get caught up in that cycle. When you notice that there's a certain thing that is performing well, when you notice that there's a trend in video content, whether that's long form or short form, no matter what the platform is, that typically performs well, it's easy to fall into that box of wanting to do that content because it is successful content, and then you're not really reading what you want to read, what makes you happy, and then you end up burning out, and in some cases you end up in a slump or you end up falling out of love with reading. And it is difficult to break out of that cycle. I know for me, I had to be very adamant about the fact that, like, hey, for instance, I really enjoy children's literature. I enjoy picture books, middle grade, chapter books, board books, beginner readers, the whole nine. And that's not something that's frequently talked about in this community, especially here on YouTube. And for a lot of people who do enjoy it, they may stay away from it because that's content that's not necessarily going to perform as well, because that may not be what your audience is necessarily looking for. I do it because it's something that I enjoy, and I know that there are some people who watch it who get good recommendations from it. They get something out of it, but I know in mass it's not what people want, but it's what I enjoy doing. And it goes back to finding that balance between what makes you happy and what is successful, and how do you make the two somehow like meet in the middle. And that's easier said than done. I think this year for me, it has mainly been about, like, I'm going to do the content that makes me happy, that I feel like doing at the end of the day, because YouTube is not a job for me. I'm not trying to become famous off of YouTube. I'm not trying to become the biggest booktuber. That's just not my end game. And my content has become a lot more sporadic since I have had to change up some things and have had to pick up another job. So for me, this is now officially, I think, for the first time in a long time, has taken the back burner to a lot of things. But that's just for me. And I know for some content creators, this is their job. And so they do have to follow the trends. They do have to keep in mind what's going to be successful and what's going to be appealing to their followers, because that is their income. And I know that that's difficult. And so, wanting to read for you and not for your followers becomes these two things that just don't mesh together at all. They don't work in alignment. But that is a huge thing. That is a huge thing. And like I've said before, like, YouTube is not a platform that necessarily rewards you for taking breaks and doing what you want and changing up your content. It's just this platform is not designed for that. If you are looking to be super, super successful at it, if you are looking at doing this just for fun as a hobby, regardless of the views, it gives you more freedom. And that's just being 100% transparent and honest. This next one I think kind of ties into the one that I just previously did. Changing this idea that we have to have content about the same popular books, and it ends up being more mediocre than the books. So the content ends up being more mediocre than the books. That's heavy shade. But I understand where they're coming from in this, because at the end of the day, it's, once again, in the YouTube, at least in the YouTube sphere, it's harder to be successful with backlist. And it's not to say that nobody's ever been successful reading backlist books, but I think that the content creators that I know that read backlist books, one of the things that they do make comments on is that people aren't always as interested in hearing about backlist information as opposed to the newer stuff. And that's not, once again, I always like to remind people when we have these discussions, we're not working in absolutes here. It doesn't mean that everyone's not interested in backlist books and that everyone doesn't make content, but there is kind of this gap in appreciation for backlist as opposed to books that are new releases, which is why you have so many people who end up reading these books that have gotten a lot of press, a lot of media, are big on social media, have gone viral in places like TikTok. And one of the interesting things, though, I think about TikTok is that it does sometimes bring forth those backlist books and make some popular again. That creates a very interesting dynamic that I had not seen prior to TikTok. So there's also this, so it's like almost like a twofold thing. There's this lack of appreciation for backlist unless that backlist book has then been made popular again. So I would say, like, reading books that are less popular, less well known doesn't always equal out to having the same popularity in terms of content as the books that get a lot of hype. But then when it comes down to, I think as a viewer, even as me, because I'm a content creator and I'm also a viewer, it does get kind of cyclical when every video you're watching has the same set of books in it. It becomes this thing like, oh my goodness gracious, and like, I need to change my subscription feed. I need to find some new people to follow because I've found myself in this cycle of seeing the same set of books in everyone's wrap-ups, the same books that everyone's recommending, because these are the books that are currently popular, which is where you find people who will start deviating, looking for other content creators to watch, or stop watching the book community in totality, which also is extremely interesting. This is one that I want to include because I think that this is something that's very interesting, and I want to come at it from a couple of different angles, and this is going to be my last one. This one says the lack of support for indie published books and books by people of color. So I think that there are niche communities within the bigger bookish community that read a lot of indie books. I know that the horror community reads a lot of indie. I know that sci-fi fantasy reads a lot of indie. I know that romance community reads a lot of indie. But then we start, if we narrow that down again to say indie books published by people of color, then that becomes, once again, we start feeling a little bit of that lack of support, but then that changes depending upon what platform you're on and who you're following. For instance, I can't speak much to the indie like horror. I'm not a horror reader. I'm not a huge SFF reader, but I can speak a little bit to the indie romance community. Now, there are a lot of people now who are reading indie romance, Kindle Unlimited, a lot of that stuff, but the ones that get talked about the most are not often ones that would be considered diverse titles. They don't gain that same traction. But that's not to say that there aren't a lot of people in the community who are trying to push those books. They just don't get as much exposure as some other creators. So there are people out there doing the work, but there is almost this lack of support because they're not getting as much popular push as other books. And I think that the romance community, you can see a little bit of that where they are heavy indie readers, but who's writing those books and who are those books about is where we start to see some of that disparity, unless you know who to follow. And I follow very specific creators on especially Bookstagram and TikTok. Let me tell you, if you're looking for specifically, I know for me, I look heavily for Black indie romance. There are people who've been doing the Lord's work for years, okay? They may not have the platform that we see for some creators here on YouTube or even some creators on TikTok, but I promise you they're doing the Lord's work. You have to navigate through all of that to find these specific creators, which it shouldn't be like that, but unfortunately it is. But I understand where you're coming from, where I think traditionally published has traditionally been what we've seen more prevalence of, but I do think that indie is making its way through. But then if we start to look at the demographics of who's writing those indie books and who those indie books are about, then we start seeing some disparities in who's actually picking up those books and elevating those books and how far is that content reaching the masses, which I think is interesting. Now, I did say that that was going to be my last one, but I must say this one was hilarious. And I miss you, friend. I really, we haven't talked in a long time. But this person said, burn it down and start over because it honestly needs the biggest revamping. So basically burn the whole book community down and let's start fresh. Let's start over. It's changed a lot. I will say that in the 10 years that I have been a part of this community, I have seen it at its best, at its worst, and all of the in between, its ups and its downs. It's a very interesting community to be a part of. It is a bubble of its own. I think what we see in the book community, I don't see in the larger reading community, especially working in the library. So it's seeing the differences is always very interesting. And I don't know how much it's going to evolve in the next 10 years. I won't be here in this community like making content in the next 10 years. I just don't foresee that happening. I barely see myself making content to the end of this year. But I do feel as though it's interesting. And it was a handful of my patrons actually who came up with the idea for me to do a video of the wildest things I've seen in the 10 years that I've been a part of this book community. And I would love to do something like that, because when you've been in a community that long, you do see some of the most wild things that have happened. And I definitely would love to talk a little bit about that. But yeah, those are just some of the things that y'all would love to see change about the book community. Thank you all to everyone like who responded to this. I love doing these videos where I kind of ask y'all a question and you answer. If y'all have any ideas of what you would like me to like post on Instagram as a question and have me kind of have a discussion, a reaction to them, let me know in the comments down below. And as always, y'all, I'll be back with another video soon. Bye.
Keep moving like the scars aren't even there. It's in the air like a blazing flare.